My phone screen glowed like a little tombstone on the nightstand. Tomorrow was supposed to be the best day of my life, my wedding day, but my mother's text message felt like a flat tire before the race. No call, no apology, just the cold, hard pixels saying she'd skip it. She claimed she had to help my brother, Mark, with some made-up emergency. I stared at the words until they blurred, realizing that even on the day I built a brand new life, I was still the one left standing outside the frame. If you've ever been the forgotten one, stick around, because what happens next is a silent, satisfying revenge you have to see to believe. I blew out the candles I had set aside for my parents' special seats at the rehearsal dinner. It wasn't just the words on the screen that cut me. It was the easy, thoughtless way she did it. No explanation, no regret, just her usual priority list where Mark always landed at number 1. I was getting married in less than 12 hours, and she chose a minor sibling drama instead. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just locked the door to the quiet dinner, knowing that I was finally done waiting for a space that would never be made for me. The next chapter reveals how I used a $6 million secret to send a message back home. I grew up watching Mark get the big, gold-wrapped gifts on Christmas morning, the ones that screamed, "Favorite." Mine was always off to the side, smaller, and filled with things like socks or a notebook. "You like writing things down," my mom would say, as if getting practical things made me special. Mark got the spotlight. I got the instructions. The pattern held through high school. Mark got a party for winning a football trophy. But when I got a full scholarship to college, all Mom said was to remember to help Mark with his application essay later. It was never cruelty, just absence, a steady, quiet forgetting that built up over years like dust on a forgotten shelf. I learned to build my own world in silence. I didn't ask for recognition anymore. I started building it instead. That's how I got into architecture and design, building things that stood strong, unlike my family structure. My graduation gift from them was a reminder to send Mark money for his rent. My wedding gift was a text message ditching me. This quiet dismissal was the final piece of wood to fuel my fire. I remember staring out the window of my new oceanfront villa the day after the wedding, still numb from the emotional whiplash. I hadn't told anyone about the text, not even my new husband. But the sting of that abandonment, the final confirmation that I didn't rate, was a bitter flavor I couldn't spit out. That's when I saw the reflection of the sea stretching to the horizon. I wasn't angry. I was finally awake to the fact that I had the power to redefine who my real family was. I pulled out my old leather-bound notebook. I drew a line down the middle and started making a list, not of guests, but of people. On one side, I wrote down all the names of people who, like me, had always been left out. On the other side, I wrote Molly's parents and Mark. It was time to set a new table. The next thing I did was call the TV network that had been filming my house. They were about to make my private life very, very public, and the show would air the same week my mother hit me with a shocking demand. If you believe that everyone deserves a seat at the table, not just the favorites, hit subscribe. Join me as I stop carrying this weight and finally set my own boundaries. And if you think Molly should have answered the phone right away to confront her mother, comment "truth" now below. Don't side with people who avoid the hard conversations. I pressed send on my reply to my mother's text. That's okay. Then I closed my phone, slid it into a drawer, and looked at the perfectly set, empty dining room. This was the space they chose to abandon, and I knew, with a sudden, cold certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was about to use this very room to show them exactly what they missed and what they would soon regret. The question wasn't if they'd call me back, but what outrageous request they'd make when they finally did. That text from my mother, the one where she chose my brother Mark's made-up emergency over my wedding, finally did it. It was like the final crack in a wall I had been holding up since I was 8 years old. I realized I had been waiting my whole life for an invitation to my own family. Now, Sitting in my huge new villa that cost more money than I could count, I was finished. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table anymore. I was going to build a brand new table, one where everyone felt welcome. What I did next was a total surprise, and it changed everything. I walked to the big glass wall and looked out at the ocean. The words from the text were burned into my mind. "We'll skip your housewarming. Your sister just moved, too." Okay, fine. They could skip me, but I was going to rewrite the whole story. I grabbed the leather-covered notebook I've had since college. I drew a thick line right down the middle of a blank page. On one side, I wrote, "Always had a seat." On the other, "Never did." The never did list filled up fast. It wasn't just me. It was Rachel, my college friend who always waited alone at the airport. It was Eli, my cousin, who got left out of the last family party. And Aunt Marianne, who had to eat in the kitchen at holidays because she talked too loud. I underlined each name, pushing the pen hard into the paper. These were the people who understood what it felt like to be quietly erased. I was going to build them a house, too. I stayed up all night, rolling tracing paper over my huge dining table. I wasn't just planning a dinner. I was planning a structure. I mapped out every line, angle, and light source, just like I would for an architectural project. I wrote at the very top, "Everyone has a seat." I measured everything so that no one's back faced the beautiful ocean view. Every chair, every light, every moment was designed to say one simple thing: you belong. By dawn, the blueprint was ready. I opened my laptop and started sending messages short, direct, and straight to the point. "Dinner this Saturday, my place by the coast. Come hungry." Then I started making calls, and the disbelief in their voices was hard to hear. "You're hosting?" they kept asking. I just said, "It's time." This was my little revolution. But the most unbelievable thing was still ahead. I needed a crew to capture all this beauty. The villa started buzzing with life. I moved around like a boss on a construction site, clipboard in hand. I got 15 settings, all identical, no hierarchy in pattern or size. Even the candles were unscented. When the local chef, Margaret, arrived and asked what kind of dinner it was, I looked at the fading gray sea and told her the truth. "It's a table for people who stopped being invited." She just smiled, like she understood a secret. Then, on Friday evening, the HGTV film crew showed up early, asking for one last look at the finished villa. I agreed right away. It felt right that this house, built from my quiet pain, should be seen exactly as it was: perfect, calm, and ready. The cameras floated through the golden light, filming the perfect table I had built for the forgotten. One cameraman whispered something amazing to me that I'll never forget. That night, I left a simple, handwritten card at every single plate. "You belong here." 15 touches, small and deliberate. I stood back, looking at the table stretched out toward the ocean. No head seat, no comparisons, just chairs waiting. Tomorrow, they would fill with people who needed this place. What I didn't know was that the camera crew had captured a secret moment that would bring my mother back into my life in the most dramatic, demanding way possible. The day of the dinner felt like a perfectly still moment right before a big wave hits. The villa was quiet, smelling faintly of salt and cedar. Every chair was exactly where I planned it, facing the enormous glass wall and the endless sea. I watched the sunset turn the horizon gold, a thin line between the old hurt and the new beginning. I was ready for my new family, the one I chose to walk through the door. But I didn't know that my real family, the ones who skipped my wedding, were about to see everything, thanks to a camera crew I forgot was there. The first headlights wound up the hill just as I lit the candles. Rachel's children ran toward the door, their laughter carrying over the sound of the ocean. Aunt Marianne clutched a pie wrapped in a towel, her face bright. The hum of conversation started soft, then grew sure and warm inside the villa. I took my seat halfway down the table, not at the end, and we ate. No speeches, no drama, just the sound of forks and the warmth of voices that finally had a place to belong. For the first time since I was a little girl with a tiny, practical gift, I felt complete. The house was pulsing with a quiet life, not because my original family was there, but because every single chair was finally full. I looked at all the happy, excluded people around the long oak table, and I felt a peace I hadn't realized I was missing. I thought that was the end of the story, a silent victory, but the biggest wave hadn't even broken yet. The HGTV episode aired the very next week, while we were all gathered again on the terrace. Someone projected the show onto a white sheet, with the sea whispering below us. The opening shot panned over the cliff and rose up toward my house, flooding the screen with light like gold water. I looked at Aunt Marianne and Rachel, and their faces were full of pride. They couldn't believe this beautiful space was mine, and that it was made just for them. Then the narrator's voice came on, strong and clear. When designer Molly Howard built her oceanfront villa, she wanted to create a space where everyone had a seat at the same table. Then my own voice, recorded months ago, played over the air. Fairness isn't decorative, it's structural. The whole terrace went silent. Rachel whispered, "You said that. You actually said that." I just smiled, watching the sunlight cut through the cedar beams on screen. The episode continued, showing the long, even oak table. It showed my hands aligning the silverware and the candles flickering like steady heartbeats. It showed a space where no one was more important than anyone else, a direct opposite of the home I grew up in. When the credits rolled, applause filled the terrace. I leaned back, breathing the salt air, thinking, "It's over. I did it." But that was the exact second my phone started vibrating, lighting up the darkness. It vibrated once, then again, then nonstop, stacking up missed calls like tides. Mom, Dad, Mark, all of them. Rachel noticed and asked if I was going to answer. I just looked at the glowing screen, full of names that had ignored me for years. "No," I said quietly. "Not yet." I let it ring. By morning, there were over 30 missed calls and texts that started off confused and quickly turned angry. The texts were wild. "We saw the show. Why didn't you tell us?" Followed by, "You embarrassed us." I didn't reply. I opened my notebook, checked off the last box. Dinner completed. I knew they were only calling because the truth was now public. But what I didn't know was the unbelievable, high-stakes financial demand. My mother was about to make a demand that would prove she still hadn't learned anything about family or fairness. Would I finally answer the phone, or just let the truth hang in the open? The texts kept flooding in after the episode aired. They were angry and full of capital letters. My mother wrote, "You embarrassed us." My father muttered something about drama and attention in a background voice message. They were only upset because their secret, the fact that I was always second best, was now seen by everyone in town. They weren't calling to apologize for skipping my wedding. They were calling because I had dared to become visible without their permission. I knew exactly why I had to wait to answer that phone. Grandma, the only one who truly understood what was happening, called me later that morning. She warned me softly, "They'll try to rewrite it. They'll say they were misunderstood." I told her I knew, and she gave me the best advice. "Don't argue. Just let the truth sit in the open. It's stronger there." I needed that advice because I knew my mother would try to spin a story, making herself the victim. I just needed to let her speak and let the consequences of her actions fall on her. An hour after talking to Grandma, my phone buzzed again. It was Mom. I took a deep breath, answered, and put it on speaker, right there on the kitchen counter, the same kitchen they had ignored for years. Grandma sat beside me, sipping her tea, watching the glass wall and the flickering light from the sea. I was ready. My mother started, her voice falsely gentle. "Beverly, we watched your episode. I think there's been a huge misunderstanding," she started, immediately blaming the TV show for making it sound like they had excluded me. She tried to use Mark as an excuse again. Your sister was moving that weekend. You know how busy things get. That was when I held the line, keeping my voice steady and quiet. I reminded her, "You excluded me in your own words, Mom." I still have the text. The silence on the line was heavy. Then came the familiar shift, the practiced move to make me feel small. "You're overreacting again," she said, with that defensive, rational lilt. "We've always supported you. We just didn't think you'd want to make a spectacle of a housewarming. You've always been so private." I looked at Grandma, who hadn't said a word, and waited. I knew this wasn't the real reason for the call. Grandma's voice cut in, steady and measured, taking the spotlight away from my mother for the first time in my life. "Judy, stop. I've watched you do this since she was a child, always turning the light away from her." My mother tried to interrupt. "Mother, this isn't the time." But Grandma cut her off again. "It's the only time." She was delivering the final judgment. Grandma didn't stop there. She laid out the truth for everyone to hear. "Every Christmas, every birthday, you built the whole house around Chloe's comfort. You told yourself it was fairness. It wasn't. It was favoritism." My mother's breath hitched, realizing the truth was now fully exposed. And now the whole town has seen it for what it is. I didn't need to speak. The weight of the silence was finally hers to hold. When the call ended, Grandma looked at me over her teacup. "You didn't need to win," she said. "You just needed to stop carrying it." I felt an enormous weight lift from me. But even with the truth out, the story wasn't quite finished. I still hadn't told them my most secret plan, the final, private meeting I was setting up. I knew they would come, but I wasn't setting a table for 15. The final chapter will reveal the true purpose of that tiny, scarred cedar table, and the one last thing Molly needed from her family before she could truly walk away. After the call with my mom and Grandma, the house felt calm. The big argument was over. I felt like the sea outside, which had been crashing hard against the cliffs, had finally quieted down. Grandma had told me I didn't need to win. I just needed to stop carrying the heavy burden of trying to please them. And that's exactly what I did. Justice didn't look like me yelling. It looked like balance, where their silence finally matched mine. 2 days later, the villa was quiet again. The chairs were still pulled close from the big dinner, and the air still smelled faintly of salt and lemon. I walked barefoot through the great room, each step echoing against the glass. The sea outside was gray and steady, just going about its business, not caring about the drama that had unfolded inside. I hadn't turned my phone on since the big call, letting the silence do its work. I opened the terrace doors and let the wind move through the house, carrying away the heaviness that had lived there for too long. For years, I had built beautiful spaces for other people to feel included. Now, I understood that I was actually building this silence for myself all along. I needed this space to prove I could stand strong without their approval, but the story wasn't totally finished yet. That evening, I invited only 3 people back, my parents and my brother Mark. No cameras, no big party, no table for 15. I set up a small table near the fireplace, the old cedar table from the shed behind my childhood house. It was covered in faint scars from when I first sanded it as a girl, a symbol of everything I built alone. This was my final, most important design. I set 4 plates on the scarred wood and waited. When they arrived, they looked smaller somehow, like the ocean's huge presence behind them was shrinking them down. My mother ran her fingers along the chair's edge, whispering, "It's beautiful, different from what I imagined." I simply replied, "It's home." Dinner was quiet. The fire crackled, and my father actually complimented the food. Then Mark looked at the little table, his voice finally soft. "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't know that it hurt that much." I just nodded. I didn't need to say anything else. No one apologized, but no one had to. The silence between us wasn't war anymore. It was space. My mother finally exhaled, slow and unguarded. "You did good, Molly. Really good. It wasn't the huge, dramatic apology I used to dream of. It was just recognition, and that was enough. After they left, I stayed by the fire until the embers cooled. The waves outside kept their same rhythm, the sound I'd heard my whole life. Only now, it didn't sound like distance. It sounded like return. I laid my hand on the old cedar table. Finally home. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story was for you. Molly's silence wasn't weakness. It was design, structure, and control. Sometimes walking away isn't losing. It's rebuilding on your own terms. If this moment when Molly closed the door and chose peace over permission stayed with you, hit the like button. If you know someone who needs to hear this story about setting boundaries, please share this video. And if you want more stories where justice speaks in silence, subscribe. There's always another quiet revenge waiting to be shared.